Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining episode 2 of our Fireside Chats. Without exception, every organisation I talk to at the moment are really now starting to, determine, plan, execute what that future of hybrid working is going to be as people look forward to returning to offices, either full-time or part-time, as we move out of, hopefully for the last time, out of COVID-19. Most organisations have adapted really, really well to remote-only working. Let's face it, we've had no choice. But since we're all in the same position, everyone working from home on laptops or devices and things, using video, sharing notes, whiteboarding, etc., has kind of just become common practice now. And I think it's really advanced the way that most organisations are doing collaborative working, far above what was there before. Products like Microsoft Teams and WebEx and Zoom have seen absolute huge explosions in both adoption and also in the number of new features that have, of course, been released across those products to keep up with not just each other, but with what industry and the world has needed to work on. So I think it's definitely been a catalyst for innovation across everything. Many of you listening today will be thinking about, or have already decided what's going to happen when people return to work. I know many of you are closing offices or planning not to renew leases or taking on more kind of WeWork type places to enable better huddles of people together. And of course, some are going more along the lines of Twitter and Dropbox and Microsoft in some cases to pretty much eliminate office space for focused work. So instead, we're seeing a huge trend around how organizations are transforming those workplaces to better cater for meetings and collaboration, both internally and with clients and customers. So many customers we speak to every day now are looking at, how they enable this model of hybrid working without disadvantaging anybody that's actually in the office. And that's a really weird phenomenon, I think, because we're used to almost be able to share any piece of content, record our meetings, transcribe our meetings, whiteboard together. But when people return to the offices, we of course need to make sure that we have fully inclusive meetings. So if we've got people that are in meeting rooms, then can they still see the shared content? Can they collaborate and participate in the meeting like they could at home? So that's really kind of the intro, I guess, for this chat today. I think it will be very topical, certainly speaking to our panel, who you'll be speaking to in a moment, have all got some great advice, aspirations, ideas, niggles, concerns about what that's going to look like. So today we're going to hear from our customer advisory board, who you would have met last week. You can see their names on the screen. And again, they represent a number of different organizations in different sectors and of different size, and are probably all at different stages of where they are in their planning and thinking around what that hybrid workforce looks like. So I'm going to, without further ado, hand over to the panel and ask the first question, which Kevin, I'm going to direct at you, if that's okay, is what is the policy for working that your organisation at East Ridings are planning on adopting, post-COVID and beyond?
Yeah, thanks for that, Rob. Just to set a little bit of context first, we're at East Riding Council, so we've got just over 11,000 staff, and we've got nearly 5,000 of those working at home. So it was quite a big shift. We were just a chat beforehand, and it's basically a year ago since we've actually been in a position where we've shifted. Prior to that, home working was very, very, there wasn't much of it about, I have to say. So the culture of the organisation has shifted radically, which I'm sure most other organisations have as well. So basically what we're looking at is a blended approach where staff have the choice to actually come into the office or work from home. And clearly that provides some opportunities and some challenges as well, which is exactly the discussions we're going to have today, because we've got something like 260 odd buildings across the East Riding. For every sort of service that we run from a local government perspective, we've probably got about 150 meeting rooms. So it's how we actually blend them meeting rooms with people working from home. They're all different sizes, everything from 4 desks up to massive conference centres, because we've even got Bridlington Spa in Bridlington. And basically, we're looking at kitting out conference centres as well. So it's very very much of a change, which we're now looking at how we implement that. So the policy itself across the organisation is a blended approach. That's what we're looking at, with staff actually having the choice to come in or actually work from home.
May I chime in here? So thank you for that insight. And hi guys, it's Mo here from Microsoft. It's really interesting to see kind of the policies you're implementing, or this new change in terms of how we're all working now. And you're quite right. It's literally 12 months to the week in terms of how the world's changed and how we're starting to tackle work. I mean, I'll give you a classic example. I'll be at Microsoft just over a year now, and when I joined Microsoft, I must have spent all in all 2 weeks out on the road, and the remainder of my time here at Microsoft, I've been working from here, my little home office. But using applications like Microsoft Teams, I've really not seen any issues in terms of how I communicate with colleagues, with being able to kind of do my work. It's been work as normal, if you want to call it that. Another classic example, I mean, back when I first was joining Microsoft, I live in the middle of England, so I live by Birmingham, and the office at Microsoft is down in Reading, and I had a Jaguar XF at that time. And I was like to the partner, I was like, hey, I think I need to change cars. So I managed to sweet talk her and ended up purchasing a Tesla Model S, which is an awesome piece of kit. But I've not been able to drive it anywhere because literally I've just been working from home. And it just really shows how this change has happened. And predominantly when I used to work, 9 times out of 10, I'll be out on the road visiting our clients, our customers, etc. But it's weird how it's taken a global pandemic, to really get a lot of IT organizations and administrators to really start looking at the technologies that, not just Microsoft, but our partners have had in place for at least the last 2 or 3 years. And, since then, we've made some tremendous changes in terms of this new work ethic, this new way of working, and this new kind of hybrid way of working as well. So I'd love to hear more from the panel here, and absolutely, I'd love to give you some of my insights on what we're seeing from a Microsoft standpoint as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mo. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? And Aidan, I know you've got some points in a moment to make, but I think we're in a position now. We're certainly seeing it from the expectations of our staff now, and people we're interviewing and recruiting, and it's completely changed. I mean, we were surprisingly, being a very technology company, a lot of our teams came into the office most days, because they were meeting customers and clients, and just for their own purposes. And it's incredible how that mindset has completely changed. And I think, it has taken not just the technology. I think, as you say, a lot of the technology, Mo, was there before, but it was a cultural mindset around how organizations could work. And almost we accepted that certain things didn't happen if you work from home, or things work differently at home than they do in the office. And I think that's almost flipped on its head. I think outside of the social, mental well-being of people and collaborating and communicating like humans are designed to do, which I think has been probably the biggest challenge that most people have dealt with, depending on your background and working conditions and things, has been key. So I think the technology definitely is there. We'll come on to a technology later about some of the things that we're using and how we're getting over those things, and some of the life-saving features that we probably now got in the products and stuff. But Aidan, did you want to give us a view on what Govia Thameslink are looking to do? What's that approach going to be now as people start returning, and how's it been?
Well, I think it's fair to say we're probably still in that definition phase of that. I think from my perspective in IT, it's looking how we can support that. I think it is interesting looking back a year ago, because at this stage we were kind of pretty much throwing people out the door with laptops to go home, and we were rapidly setting up always on VPN. I wish I'd had that on January in the roadmap instead of September for last year, but it got rapidly deployed in about 3 weeks with a timetable change in between, whilst we did one data center and the other last year. So and I think there has been a whole shift, really. I mean, if you look at going back before kind of March last year, we'd already flipped from Skype to Teams because the usage was fairly low across the business. So you kind of went, we knew, I think Skype had been announced as been retired by that point, so, or on the roadmap to be retired. So we kind of went, let's bite the bullet and switch everyone over now. We luckily just kind of got most of the staff flipped over to Windows 10 and Office M365 Office, I think it's 2016 version at the time. So kind of we were sort of luckily ready and sort of set up to go. We were doing a fleet rollout to replace Windows 7 laptops with Windows 10 ones. So we happily also had laptops to throw out the door with people when we suddenly kind of went, you've got 3 major offices in central London, which are suddenly emptying and sending people home. I think we ended up shipping about 40Ks worth of DSE kit out to people with laptops and screens and laptop risers, keyboards and mice to sort of support people whilst they're at home. I think coming back to the offices, we set up, I suppose, during COVID. Most of the 3 major offices have been fairly empty, to be honest. As a company, we're, 8,500 staff, roughly. The great majority of that is frontline staff on platforms, stations, depots, and engineering work, which you have to be in there to do the job. We've looked at as an approach across the company is to kind of keep people as safe as they can whilst running a railway, and part of that has meant sort of more sort of office-based staff working from home. Luckily, we were able to support them with Always On with VPN. I think coming back to the office, our approach has been we already had some Surface Hubs, version 1s and version 2s, and we were already looking at the time. I think, yeah, in about 2 weeks, 2 weeks time, we'd have migrated one of our 2 legacy phone systems across to Teams Voice Cloud PBX. So we flipped the phone system or 2 old phone systems to all of that and sort of got people remotely with it. I don't see us going back to a certain extent. I think if you look going forwards, we're using a mixture of, well, I think we had some HP kit and some Yearlink kit. I think we're looking more at the Yearlink kit going forwards, but we're outfitting our meeting rooms with Teams meeting room systems and sort of, I suppose, the lower end of the spectrum, because most of our rooms are quite small, the lower end of the spectrum of the sort of collaboration bars, sort of the A20s sort of the world from Yearlink to support a blended approach. I don't think we'll ever be in the position again where you'll have everyone in the room for a meeting. I think it's to the territory of kind of, you're going to have to adapt as to kind of how do you get people who are either at home remotely or 2 or 3 different sites collaborating effectively in a meeting. And I think that's going to kind of, I don't see us going back. Kind of our Teams adoption was an exponential curve upwards. We were pretty much using it for voice conferencing at the start, and then it kicked into gear properly. And I think if people walked in and looked at one of our old phones on the desk for audio conferencing in a meeting room now, they'd be kind of going, "What? I have to go back to that?" I'm used to video and used to working remotely. Been chatting for a bit, so.
No, thanks, Aidan. And I think it's an interesting one, isn't it, as you say, because I think you've got people that have gone, organisations that have gone from using, particularly I think those that have probably transitioned from Skype to Teams. I mean, certainly we see that a lot with customers. We are still migrating, where there was a lot of use of Teams for ad hoc calling and for IM and even group chat and those kind of things. And I think it's been really interesting to see, I mean, just if I look at ourselves internally, how so many more of the features, I guess, have been discovered, right? And either that's accidentally or through really good adoption and training. And I think a lot of those things have probably gone out the window slightly because of that kind of rapid urgency to move. I think, there's been, and we covered this loosely on the last session around actually, what platforms do people use? Is it all one, or are there pockets of unsanctioned, non-company approved video apps and stuff being used as well, and therefore how do you control that and those kind of things. I think it's also a testament to how organizations have kind of been there before, right? And I think if you've already had a good solid deployment of Teams well adopted, those organizations have naturally taken that by the stride. And I think Alex, I know you were, I guess, fortunate, clever, a seer, whatever one of those things it might have been, right? But your adoption of Teams has been phenomenal. The way your organisation uses Teams is phenomenal, and of course, you've got quite big plans around return to work as well. Do you want to just share some of your experiences?
Yeah, so I wouldn't call myself a seer, or my wife certainly wouldn't. But we've adopted Teams almost from when it was first sort of under NDA being tested, and we were asked to participate in it. We have moved from Link 2010, 2013, Skype for Business, and ultimately to Teams. So the business as a whole, of around 1,100 users spread out across the world, have had to always kind of ad hoc work together, or collaborate together, and is trying to find the right balance to helping that. So having everyone on Teams certainly helps. You've got one tool that people use instead of several. And when we sent everyone home last year to work, it was it was a test initially for a couple of days. Then we realized actually that we weren't seeing any decrease in work, and we weren't seeing an increase in support tickets, which made us realize that people were just getting on with it. What we have noticed and what we have started to work towards is more of a working whenever and wherever policy. So it shouldn't matter where our users are. They should be able to access the right tools and right services regardless. And so what we're probably starting to see a shift is the traditional, on-premise services, file shares, things like that. We're now starting to look to migrate that data into Teams or into Office 365, so that the users can access it wherever they are, and almost have probably using Teams as the hub for all home or all work. So regardless of whether you're so each team would have a team, and all work relating to that team would be inside there, and it doesn't matter how you on or offboard people. It's very easy to understand where that data is, and it makes it easy for new users to the business or to those specific teams or projects to be onboarded with that. So that's our next challenge, is actually taking the old school way and the old school IT approach and adopting it to more of a cloud first world. And that's probably our biggest challenge for this year, I'd say.
So thanks, Alex. And Kevin, I think you had another point you wanted to make.
It's just to say this is a seismic shift for all organisations, really. And it's interesting from a local government perspective, speaking to colleagues in the wider Yorkshire and Humber region. Everyone's thinking of this way. So it is a case of this agile, blended approach where people are working from home and working in the office. And I think every organisation's looking at that. If you'd have asked me the question 1 year ago, will social workers work from home using Teams? I can guarantee the answer would not be the same answer today. So that's why our policies are changing significantly, because it's proved it can work.
Yeah, great. And Mo, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah. Absolutely, and some great comments coming from here. I mean, going back to the original question, what policy for working is your organization planning on adopting? It's really to do with this new culture change, right? There's that classic joke that goes around, the great British public we hate change. Anything changes, we have a massive uproar. But this time last year, we flipped the switch and we moved over to Teams. A lot of us did it over a weekend, even though we had a 12-month deployment plan, and we kind of just got on with it. And over the last year, with very minimal negative impact, very minimal service requirements, etc. We got on with it. We got used to it. We loved the way we work, and what we've seen, the trends we've seen throughout all of last year and moving into this year is the normal 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, sitting in an office. Can you ever see yourselves doing that again? And a lot of organizations have really worked out that we can actually run businesses with remote people out there. However, there's always going to be a need for office space. There's always going to be a need for people to come into an office for whatever reason. And this is where we're seeing kind of these trends of 25% of the workforce, soon as we can start going back into work, will return to work for a week or two and then swap over with another 25%. And we've always got this 75% of our workforce working remotely. And what tools do we have to ensure that we can stay connected, be it the meeting rooms at the office, be it our home office? And actually this, where we're sitting in right now, is what we would class as our huddle space inside it's an extension of our physical office spaces that we have across the world.
And Mo, I think that brings us on nicely to the next question, in fact, which is, so we've talked about how we've adapted and teams and the mindset shift. So a question back, which I know is quite topical for most of you, is, what are the biggest challenges that we now face, or you now face, or expect to face in actually enabling people to work in these new hybrid spaces where it's not just about the odd meeting room that everyone goes into. So what are the, what are those biggest challenges? And Kevin, I'll come back to you on that one. So I know that's something that you've been thinking about how you address.
I've got to be honest, because we came from, as you know, Rob, a Lotus Notes environment and literally shifted across to Microsoft this December just gone, and implemented Teams in 3 days, just before the pandemic happened. Our challenges, our meeting rooms and things are not set up for any of this whatsoever. So we're starting from scratch on this, which you could argue is a disadvantage or an advantage, depending on how you look at it. Because I said before, we've got all our meeting rooms to set up. We want to be in a position to ensure that when there is a meeting, people don't have to think I've got to come in. And those that are in the office also can actually go to that physical space. And that's one of the biggest challenges at the minute, because with the pending return of staff, which we don't know what percentage of staff it's going to be, we expect it to be fairly low, but we don't want to be in a position, given our geography and everything else, that staff have the equipment at home. So why can't they participate in the meeting with people in the office? And I think that's really, really important to make sure then physical spaces actually create that virtual environment. So therefore, it doesn't matter where you are, at home, in the office. I mean, I even had a call with somebody a few days ago who was actually, unfortunately, they had to go out of the county for some personal reasons, and on his mobile phone in a lay-by. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but the fact I've got to be careful how I say that, I should say. Off the road, etc., not driving, but a full Teams conference call. And to think as an organisation doing that a year ago, it wouldn't have been even on the radar. No. But it's really important to ensure that physical spaces actually don't create any barriers to stop us working remotely.
I think you're right, and I think one of the things certainly that I've experienced is I've had people join. We have a weekly leadership call on a Tuesday morning, and it's been great. People joining by video when they've been out for a walk, and even being out, right, there's a limit of, I guess, what you can do on a mobile screen that size. But I think it always used to be the audio was kind of what everyone did when they weren't in the office. They joined by audio, or they're in the car, they dialed in. And I think it's really raised the level now of not just the interactivity within meetings, but the richness of a meeting, and that people do feel they can collaborate, even just being able to like things that are being said, and have live transcriptions on the screen and things when people are in calls. I quite often join calls that I'm not necessarily going to contribute to, but I've been asked to join it, and I might just sit and watch it with subtitles on, or I might watch the transcript back later on if there's anything that kind of comes out. And I think that whole inclusive nature now of meetings is far richer, and I hope we don't go back to that. I really hope we don't default back to that. I've dialed in, because suddenly the effectiveness of that meeting goes down to that lowest common denominator. Mudassar, did you have anything to add around challenges of space and how you plan to manage it?
Yeah, I mean, over the past year, I think it's fair to say we've all learned so much about productivity, flexibility, and also business resilience. At Waverton, we've been working, in ways now that we never thought would be possible. I mean, including managing security protocols remotely for our staff, and it also, more importantly, learning to connect with small or large teams while presenting to a screen. And lastly, most importantly, is taking care of family and friends while being in a room on a call as well. I think in 2020, Waverton's two primary objectives were to utilize the cloud and enhance business resiliency as a whole, to deliver a more flexible, agile working for staff, and also to provide a more flexible, modern way of working for our front office and client-facing teams. However, obviously, lockdown altered our business objectives, and it was very much agreed by the Waverton board in May to really fast track and expand our scope to deliver a more robust and flexible working solution to staff. And obviously recognizing that the operational risks associated to working from home should be considered. And and I think it was important to kind of factor that in with the objectives last year. We're very fortunate to be in a position where the board approved the actual overall migration to Microsoft as a whole. My objectives were very much focused around delivering a technology transformation program with the use of Microsoft 365 and Surface devices, which fortunately we are very much in full flow of now. But at the same time, in terms of managing space, I think we rolled out various solutions to manage office space as a whole through the use of desks to meeting rooms. And one of our objectives was also to ensure that we had the full use of Microsoft Teams at the desk as well as our meeting rooms. So it's very important for us to implement solutions that aligned with our Microsoft strategy. Unfortunately, we did go outside to look for a third-party tool to manage our desks and meeting rooms. We did look at Microsoft shifts, but unfortunately that wasn't suitable for our needs. But again, the purpose of going to a third party, which aligned with our Microsoft strategy, allowed us to really adopt a true hybrid working and collaboration model. And with this solution, our staff can very easily take control of their workday from home, and they can plan when they want to come in, book their desks in advance, and they can also allow fellow colleagues to view whether they will be in the office or whether they're working from home. And I think what's also important is now that we've fully rolled out Yealink systems within our meeting rooms, it allows our staff to be collaborative from within the office and from home, and using a tool to allow us to manage the availability is crucial. And fortunately, we've been in a very fortunate position to also roll that out in 2020.
I was muted. Sorry. I'm sure Mo won't mind the fact that you're not just using Microsoft technology, but I think it does open a point, and I think I'd like to ask the same question to Rowland and then to Alex around actually how are you managing or planning to manage that space to allow people to, whether that's desks or whether that's meeting spaces, because if we're all going to have far more of them now, and they're going to be much more about drop-ins rather than just people sitting at the same desks. I guess there's two parts of that, right? There's the how do we manage the space from allowing people to know they can come in, particularly in the shorter term where we've still got some form of social distancing in place. Nobody wants to get to an office space and find there's no desk to work at and have to go home. But also how do we manage that from a mindset perspective? People that may have sat at the same desk every day for 5 years that have got their their shoes and their trophies and whatever else they've got in their drawers. How do we deal with that? Rowland, any thoughts?
So yeah, definitely. It's something we've been thinking about since last summer. In fact, since before last summer. We put something in place last summer where we built a simple power app that people are able to go onto a page on the intranet and book a desk. They don't actually book a specific desk. They just get allocated the next available slot in a SharePoint list that sits behind the scenes. And as soon as you hit 25 people coming in on a particular day, it says there's no more space, you can't come in now. We did experiment with whether that needs approval by line managers and things to try and control it. And in the end, we just kept it simple. First come, first served, up to the number of desks available. And that's a limit while we have social distancing requirements in place. Our office can actually fit about 65 people before any social distancing is required. And we're currently using every other desk. So we've got 25 bookable slots for people. That works quite well for us. We've also got individual meeting room calendars, so people can go into Outlook and just book a meeting room there, the way that many of us do for that kind of technology. And we've got Teams meeting rooms kit in the rooms, so people can go in and join them. What I think is one of the big challenges we're having is people knowing whether or not they actually want to come in. And that's not in terms of are they nervous about the space and things. It's about understanding who else is going to be in. And at the moment, we don't really have a good solution for this. So the case that I'm thinking about is someone saying to me, well, I might come in next Wednesday, but I want to know who else is planning to come into the office that day. Is it worth me coming in? Because I want to catch up with 2 or 3 people. I don't know whether they're planning to be in or not. And without everybody booking everything into their own diaries and then opening up lots of calendars in Outlook, finding a good solution to that is definitely a challenge that we've got. We've played around a little bit with shifts as an app within Teams. Not quite sure it's fitting things, because that's more around sort of individual times and it's a bit more detailed than we want to have. Ours is more of a daily granularity. But we think there might be something there where maybe we could book the data in using something like shifts, and then maybe do things like just have a bot that runs and every day post a message out to the core Teams channels saying who's planning to be in which days this week, or something like that. But we think that's an area that right now is needing some work for us.
Yeah, I think I've certainly seen, you know, combinations of those things with, you know, polls, for example, in Teams, or polls in like, you know, products like Yammer or Facebook for Work, or those kind of things. Alex, I know you've probably got some great things that you could share with what you've done within Awin, right?
So similar to Rowland, we have built a Power App internally. We have the pleasure, I guess, of having to do this for multiple different locations around the world. So there's all different sort of processes and procedures and different people that we have to liaise with. So it's not just focused on the UK. The UK uses a third-party program because we sort of started hot desking about 3 years ago in our London office. So we'll probably use that for when the return to work happens in the UK. But for the other locations, much like Rowland, it's a very simple Power App with a specific amount of users that can request on a daily basis that goes into a list in the same way. And it just notifies the office management in that specific region that there's going to be someone in, or if you need to also book a car parking space, etc. We also use or recommend using internally shifts for each team to understand when you're booking a day off or you're having a holiday. And whilst that is recorded in our HR system, the HR department didn't want any ad hoc days off being put in that. We only work we work a 4-day week in Awin. So we have to manage that as a team as well. And I suspect that when people start returning to our offices, we may do something similar to try and maybe link the Power App of the desk booking into shifts as well. So it automatically transfers the data over. And then we post a message each morning into each team, giving an overview of what's in shifts for that day. So again, the user doesn't have to go hunting around the different application. It's just straight there in the general channel in the team. And I can see that being useful for just informing people who is in the office. So if people want to work in their teams or know who else from their team is in, they can actually do so.
And Mo, have you got any thoughts from kind of what you've heard of things that that you'll be taking back to the mothership, or things that are coming, or things that are available in Teams now that viewers may not know about that can help with some of these things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some great comments here, and some great ways of working, and it's all to do with this new culture, this cultural change that we're making. Over the last 12 months, Microsoft's really been working hard to make what we call people-centric meeting rooms. And when we talk about people-centric meeting rooms, the idea for us is whether you're virtually joining a meeting, if you're in a lay-by as an example, or physically, if you're one of the 25 that have managed to book a room or book a seat in the office, when you join into that MS Teams meeting, we want you to feel included and inclusive with the whole range of different tools that we now have. So a lot of these tools we had already, a lot we've just launched over the last kind of few weeks and few months, and a lot is still yet to come. As a classic example, we kind of had to look at, okay, well, what are the challenges that our customers really have? One is collaboration. How do we get people to work together but not physically be in the same room? So we've introduced things like Microsoft Whiteboard within MS Teams, and also within a Teams Rooms device. So if you have whiteboarding switched on in your tenant, and you have a Microsoft Teams Rooms device connected to a touchscreen, you're absolutely being able to invoke the Microsoft Whiteboard. For those of us that are really old school, and we love having our old school whiteboards where we're using dry white markers, you can use what we call content cameras with intelligent capture, where you can physically go up and draw on the board, and intelligent capture will effectively digitize that writing and portray it back into the room. And then also when we start looking at these new rules we're implementing to adhere to social distancing measures, things like room remote. So room remote will enable a user to walk into a Microsoft Teams room with their own mobile phone or their own device, start off the room remote and actually control that in-room experience, mute people, put the volume up, add people, etc. So I know one of the challenges that was mentioned here today is, well, how do we work out who's in the office at that point? That's one part of the challenge, absolutely. But when you're in a meeting, remember, with Microsoft Teams rooms, you have the ability to instantly add people into that meeting as well, and without the need of you physically having to touch that public surface that we have in the middle of the room by using a feature like room remote, or even Teams casting, where you can just cast onto the big screen by using your own devices as well. Of course, Microsoft Teams rooms also has what we call proximity based join. So if you're near a room, a Microsoft Teams enabled room, if that room is not booked out, it pings out like a Bluetooth beacon, and then it will pop up on your phone to say, hey, room 101 is available. Would you like to add it to the meeting? You hit add, and seamlessly everything transfers into that room, and you get the very best of audio, video quality inside of that space. So there's a lot yet to come as well. So there's a lot, on our roadmap that's still yet to come. So watch this space. And of course, all the feedback and all the trends that we're seeing over the last 12 months are really helping us shape and change the way Teams is working for us in this new hybrid way of working, whether you're physically inside the room or outside of the room. I mean, take a look back 12 months ago, what Teams looked like then versus what it looks like now.
And Mo, you've just teased this point, right? But I think from your perspective, and perhaps we'll share the link to the Teams roadmap in the chat later on. But for you, the top next couple of key features coming that you think are going to help Microsoft's customers with this hybrid world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the features that came out of Microsoft Ignite last week was the Teams speakers, that Yearlink will be producing as well. And what it's what we call an intelligent speaker. So it sits as part of your Microsoft Teams Rooms device, and using Microsoft AI technology can work out who the person is talking. So let's say, for example, we're sitting here on this fireside chat, and if Aidan decides to start talking, it would recognize that, hey, it's Aidan talking. It would do the transcribing with Aidan's name. And if Aidan turned around and said, yeah, we should meet up next Wednesday at 9 o'clock, it would know that as an action and add it as an action as part of that list. And then Cortana would prompt you afterwards to say, hey, you still want to book that meeting for 9 o'clock. So all of a sudden, meetings are not just that one-way or two-way conversation that we had 12 or 13 months ago, where it's audio predominantly or video. But now all of a sudden it's a bit like Minority Report, where it's starting to predict and work out what people are asking for, what actions are coming out, and actually putting them in to make our lives easier without having to take notes, because the system does it all for you. So yeah, a lot of these features are coming soon. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's coming that unfortunately I can't talk about, but keep your eyes open over the next few months. But it's just going to keep getting better and better and making life a lot more easier, whether you're physically in a meeting or joining in virtually.
And Mo, where do you think things will go? Around the kind of meeting booking side of things. Do you, appreciate you kind of comment on your viewpoint, but do you see that? Do you think Microsoft sees that as a partnering opportunity? Obviously, there's lots of vendors out there that do meeting space bookings and desk sensors and those kind of things. Is there any insights that you've got you think Microsoft might be doing to help?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny you say might be helping. We've actually just announced it. So we've announced what we call Microsoft Teams panels from our launch partners, Crestron and Yearlink. And effectively, these are panels that sit on the outside of a room. And just like you would expect, they've got the LED. So red means it's booked, green means it's available. But the difference between us and a lot what's out there already in the world is we have the ability to inject applications within that screen as well. So as a classic example, you could walk up to a room. Scenario number one could be you've got, the relevant cameras and mics and speakers in that room, which can do people counting, and you've assigned that room for no more than 8 people. If it detects more than 8 people, it will flash up as on a banner within Teams to say, hey, there's too many people in the room, but also display it on the outside Teams panel to say room is at capacity, so you don't have to walk in. That's one example. Another example is you could walk up to one of these screens, see the room is booked out, and actually hit nearby rooms. There'll be a little button. It can bring up the floor plan, and from that same panel, you can see which rooms are available and actually book that room from that panel without the need of you having to open up your laptop or your Exchange. And even if you want, you can have, kind of walking directions to get there. Back in the good days when we used to have physical meetings and I needed to kind of book teas and coffees, I'd have to run downstairs to reception to order them. But on here, we can now actually just put a little app up that says catering. Hit catering, order your teas and coffees, don't forget the donuts, and you're good to go. So we're now starting to cater for the full kind of A to Z, not just inside of the room, but also on the outside of the room, but not just giving you the basics of, hey, a room's booked or a room's not booked, but the ability for you to be able to identify if a room is at capacity. If you want to let people know in the room that you're waiting outside, you've got a little knock feature that you can initiate. Of course, right now it's kind of limited to the meeting room space. But remember, we've only just announced, and of course, there's a whole bunch of things on roadmap. Who knows, what the future will bring in terms of, bringing it down to a desk booking system. Just watch this space, and we'll see what happens.
So Mo, thank you for that. And I think we're probably going to get a lot of interest in this. So please do comment if you've got any specific interest in these things. For the rest of the team on here, I know there's going to be some lots of interest in the Teams panel. So we'll pick up on this one. Conscious of the time, I wanted just to progress a little bit. And one of the things I think that we've probably missed from the conversation so far is, what about voice, right? So we've been talking about meetings in Teams and how we do those other things, but a lot of meetings take place over voice. We're calling customers, we're calling our own people. I'm really interested in your within Microsoft Teams and how the pandemic, or the end of the pandemic, hopefully, is shifting that. I mean, Aidan, did you want to lead us on that one?
Yeah, sure. Just get off on mute. Yeah, I suppose we flipped. I suppose we have about 3 different phone systems across different sites and different locations, and we chose to flip 2 of the legacy ones across to Teams Cloud PBX. We were already planning that for commercial reasons, and then happily, when we had to send stuff home, that meant that we'd already sort of got that in place for the 3 major offices, because that's where the 2 legacy systems were. We had a PBX which was taller than I am, so it was quite a big thing to take out of the server room, it has to be said. I suppose my question really would be: is where do you see that going with the integration with sort of Teams, and are you sort of seeing people more sort of switch across to being totally Teams voice? Because I think we've internally have seen, I'd probably class it as pretty much 90% voice with people dialing in with no video, and we were relatively sort of weaning people off kind of external third-party audio conferencing systems, and then flipped entirely to you're using a Teams client on your mobile phone. If I look at kind of even in the last week, I've probably made 3 mobile phone calls. I would hesitate to count the number of Teams calls I've made in that same time, and the number of Teams calls I've made from my mobile device using it just as a data platform to sort of get across. So I suppose, what, if anything, is coming for voice and integration anyway?
Great question. Dave, do you want to, I know you're an avid Teams user, but not Teams voice. Did you want to add any insights?
Yeah, I think Aidan hit on an interesting point there. I think from our point of view, we went cloud-based PBX 5 or 6 years ago, so we were fairly early adopters for that, and that served us really well. But with the pandemic and everyone working from home on Teams, that system, if I'm honest, doesn't get used for any internal calls. Its primary function was internal calls, and it now next to doesn't get used. And very much like Aidan, my mobile phone rings. That's unusual. Why is it not a Teams call? Why is somebody dialing me on my mobile phone instead of via Teams? So we've got an interesting transition now to understand what the technology is. We were already looking at Teams voice and trying to understand what that is, but I think we need to adapt that concept a little bit further now for the whole telephony solution. We have a high percentage of mobile phone users. People are not traveling as much. Do they still need the mobile phones? How's that going to work going forward? And just really try and understand how that all fits together. Really, it's an interesting time, but a challenging time and an exciting time. I think the pandemic, if Mo mentioned it earlier, I think this is, we all need to grab this opportunity to move forward from the pandemic and avoid the temptation to take the easy option and leave the phone systems and the mobiles as they are, and literally embrace Teams and embrace new technologies.
Excellent, thanks, Dave. And Kevin, any thoughts from you? Obviously, you've been on a rapid, almost unplanned Teams journey. What's your thoughts on voice and mobile?
One of the main challenges we had with the pandemic, when everyone went working from home, was we didn't have enough physical telephone lines coming into the organisation. So therefore, if we actually deployed with soft phones on laptops and things, it would have caused major issues, because obviously being a local authority was dealing with the pandemic, let's say call centres up and dealing with the public and dealing with major services, etc. So we just encourage people as much as we can to use Teams. And I never thought at that stage, or reflecting on it, we've now done a review of our full telephony system and what it looks like going forward, because we've got 4,500, 5,000 extensions, we've got 3,500 mobile phones, we've got Teams deployed everywhere. Our calls internally have just disappeared. I never thought we'd be in a position where some departments are saying, I don't need a desk phone, because Teams is more than adequate to use. The other flip side of it as well, from a local authority perspective, is we've used Teams voice for calling members of the public as well. So therefore, there may be some case calls, for instance, for social services or education or whichever service it is. And that person always isn't comfortable actually being in a position where they're using a PC or a smartphone to actually connect into something. So we've been using the dial facility within Teams as well for that. We initially used another product which was reasonably successful, dare I say it, quite expensive. And Teams just seemed like the better option. And we never thought that would be something we'd be looking at, but it's been quite successful.
That's a really useful one. But Rowland, do you want to give any insights as kind of how you've achieved this, right? Because you took the plunge yourselves and moved to Teams Voice.
Yeah, happy to do that. So as you say, we moved to Teams Voice. We actually were already doing this before the pandemic. We did an office move for our New York team back at the beginning of 2019. And we made the decision then that we were going to move across from our legacy voice system to use Teams. We put that in place for our US office when we did that move. And in the US, we found that the Microsoft calling plans were a good package, and they had the advantage that they were by far the easiest way to implement this. We literally gave everybody a Teams license, bought a domestic calling plan license and a phone system license on top of it, and turned that on, and then did one form to import all their old historic landline numbers. And then all of a sudden their New York numbers now reach them on Teams, and they can make an outbound call straight from there, and it shows up as though they're calling from a New York landline. And that's been very popular, and we were able to work out how the user experience for that worked, and it went down very well. We moved everybody across to being able to make calls from their mobile phone using the Teams client, or from their desk using their Surface Pro, or from meeting rooms and things. That all went very smoothly. We then looked at some of our other geographies, and we had some problems there because we've got people in Hong Kong and people in Switzerland, and at that point neither of those geographies supported Microsoft calling plans. So we had to look at other options, and our Hong Kong office also moved to a new physical location. So we managed to partner with a local telephony firm that was able to provide virtual SBC services for us there. And so again, the end user experience is I use Teams to make my calls. They show up like my local landline. Behind the scenes, it's not Microsoft stuff. We have to do a lot more with PowerShell to do things like allocate numbers and things like that. But actually the end result for our users is exactly the same. And we can provide a single set of user guides and things that work, whether you're in Hong Kong or the US or wherever. And the UK, actually, we hadn't migrated before the start of the pandemic. So we ended up doing that last summer as a bit quicker than we'd intended to. We'd previously partnered with a UK telecoms company that had linked in, provided SIP trunks into the office, into our phone system, and we spoke to them about what their offerings were. We investigated the idea of running some virtual SPCs of our own and just re-terminating the SIP trunks that we had into there and then pointing those into Teams. In the end, we actually went for a package that Gamma offer, and that is basically the equivalent of what we're doing in Hong Kong. So they run the entire service. They provide the SIP trunks in and convert it to Teams, and all we have to do is link their controllers into ours with a couple of PowerShell scripts, and then run individual shell scripts to allocate people phone numbers and things like that. And then again, end user experience is just I get calls in Teams, I make calls from Teams, and it works really well. And I have to say, actually, the quality of the sound on Teams is, I would say, better than our old legacy phone system. It works well, and just the ease of being able to have your internal calls with people and your video calls and your outbound telephone calls all in one place is great. And being able to do nice things like you can be on an internal video call with someone else in the organization, and you say, I want to dial in someone externally, and you just go into your Teams chat, open it up, add the external phone number you want to call, and make the dial out straight from the video call you're already in internally, and just add someone in over the phone externally. That's really nice with that level of integration.
Brilliant. Alex, you're another organisation that moved to Teams. I know you've been through all the Microsoft various different platforms on Link and Skype and now Teams. Any final comments on that at all?
Very similar to Rowland. We've migrated all of our legacy PBXs over to either using direct routing or native Teams voice, mainly more direct routing. But what we're now probably looking at doing is decommissioning the existing Skype for Business platform that all of that was originally linked off of. And then potentially looking at moving those direct routing boxes, which are currently in our data centers, into the cloud, either directly in Azure or using our current partner to do that, just to kind of, again, we don't need it anymore. It should just be a commodity like email. And again, our users are just use it. We have very little complaints about using it for voice. Now, that either means they're not using it or they are and it's working absolutely fine. But I'll take it. So yeah, it's it's taken us a long time to get here, but I'm very pleased that we're now here under one single platform.
Fantastic. And we touched a couple of times this week. So Ignite was obviously last week. There was lots of announcements across the majority of the Microsoft 365 and Azure and Power Platform stack. We did issue a blog around our kind of top 3 across each platform, but I'm sure you'll all have your own. So I think we'll put the link in there, and I'm sure you've got your own favourites. But I think just as we draw this to a close, and I think I'd like to say, really thank you firstly to everybody for your contribution. I think it's been really, I've certainly learned. I love these sessions where I learn something from what you've experienced. I hope you've all learned something from each other as well from this session, and obviously our viewers, I hope you have. I think before we close, we've got about 7 or 8 minutes. I guess my final question really was, have any of you got any, one particular piece of advice that you'd give any organisation that's moving to Teams, considering voice, looking at how they, have a better meeting experience, or have you got any one particular ask or hope that Teams might have both now and in the future? Who shall I pick on first? Alex, I'll ask you. Actually, you've always got a wish list.
All right. So wish list, I would hope that Teams eventually becomes less resource hungry. Being an Electron app, even though our machines have got sort of minimum 16 gig of RAM, it kind of chews it up, and that's pretty much what our users are in all the time. That an email. In terms of advice, I would say, like on the previous question, is if you can try and move voice over to it as well. It's much easier having it as an integrated solution than having to have 2 separate things kind of doing the same thing, but you have to reach out to one to do a very specific thing. So just try and integrate it if possible. The direct routing stuff is easy if you don't want to go fully Teams from the voice perspective, but yeah, do it if you can.
And of course, loads of new countries announced last week as well, which so again, check the blog out for those.
And Rob, if I may, just to respond to Alex, where Teams is resource hungry. Yes, from a Microsoft standpoint, we know that. And what I can safely say is we are working on it. Watch this space, and we're currently in the process of addressing that.
Good stuff. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that, Aidan. I'm sure you've got some things on your list.
I suppose I'd just say for anyone who's considering it, I'd just reiterate sort of what Alex said, just do it. I mean, seriously, from an adoption perspective, we had users who would never have considered using Teams, and now they're living in it. I think the more you can do to consolidate, the more you can do to make it easier for staff to sort of get stuff in one place, whether that's applications or voice. I suppose one of the things we did was an on-call register. So instead of having about 40 people with separate phone numbers and having to figure out a schedule of who's on call and who isn't on call, there's now about 5 Teams numbers, and they check in or check out of the queues. So they just dial the one number, and whoever's the on-call manager has already tagged themselves in there. So don't be restricted, I suppose. Don't think it's. I mean, Teams has kind of become the umbrella for a lot of things, I suppose, for want of a better word. And you kind of go, we're looking at sort of moving more stuff into it as much as we can do, really. I think I'm waiting.
I think my advice on that, to echo what you've said, is almost, and I see this a lot. We see, our sales team see quite a lot of tenders for voice replacement stuff, and they're still traditionally written very much like a 20-year-old phone system might be written. And I think you need to kind of rip that up and really think about how modern collaboration gets done. Teams is not a phone system, right? It's a collaboration productivity platform that's got Teams features, voice features within them, yeah. A lot of them. And I think certainly with the one, with you that I've worked with, you recognise that, but it can be a stumbling block, I think, for organisations that don't think about those things and end up putting in another VoIP platform. Not to say those VoIP platforms aren't good, but does it really align with that wider collaboration platform? Would be my tip.
I think we went for it purely because you looked at it and kind of go, I had 3 phone systems. One of them's too big. I can't. It was too big and too recent. Until we get sort of some ROI on it, we're not going to rip that out just because of the number of sites it's installed in. The other 2 were consolidated across 3 offices, and it was simply kind of, even just financially, we went for the cloud calling PBX licenses, the 120 desktop minutes, because they needed a phone system. I think if you asked them how many of them actually would need a phone on the desk, I think it would be a very different answer from when we were switching over. So that was kind of a, we knew they wouldn't necessarily use the phone as much as we thought they would, but it was a huge sticking point for them that they were used to it. It was worth us to do it commercially because it got rid of the old expensive systems and got us onto a consolidated platform. I think probably the most exciting thing for me is Teams meeting room panels, because it allows me to consolidate another system off the back of it, and I'll be very interested in seeing what the desk system, if there is possibly one in the future or not, Mo, what that looks like.
Fantastic. And Mudassar, very quickly, last comment from you. You're on mute.
Sorry, yeah. So I'm also echoing what Aidan and Alex have mentioned in terms of adoption. I think it's key that adoption is key to success and simplicity of use of a tool within our organizations. And as if you can push as many tool sets within Teams, namely chat, voice, which is what we've done as well via direct routing, it very much does bring your end user base into using and adopting Teams far more. And given our current hybrid models where we have staff now working remotely, the continued education is absolutely crucial, and keeping our users abreast of all the changes that are coming within Teams, and just on a monthly basis, just run a tech session that allows staff to drop in and just go over the 10 new features that have come out previous month. I mean, that's what we're running now on a monthly basis, and it's quite amazing how users will walk away from that meeting with one useful tip for their client pitches that they may have. So it's as much as we're adopting and pushing out Teams and all the new features, it's also very important that we keep education and training at the top of our agenda within the organizations as well. Oh, you're on mute as well.
We'll learn this one day. Mo, before we close down, any final words, thoughts from yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Some great tips from the team here. I guess from me, from an agnostic point of view, when I look from the top down, is plan ahead. It's scary to change. We know that. It's the great British public we are. As I've mentioned it before, we hate change. But now's the time to look at change. Now's the time to look at how culture is changing, what this new work-life balance is going to be. Speak with your account managers, speak with our strategic partners like Cisilion. It's scary to go out there and try and find out all the information. There's so many new announcements, so many new tools out there. Sometimes it can get overwhelming. So from a Microsoft standpoint, I would say, reach out to your account managers, reach out to, Cisilion here. And we've got a great team of case studies right here as well. People that have taken that dive, organizations that have implemented it with all kind of different elements, different needs. So yeah, make sure you reach out to your account managers, and even I can jump on a call with you to explain kind of the latest and greatest and what's relevant to you, because as we know, Microsoft being this huge beast that we are, we have 1,000,001 different things we can probably help you with. Let's read through everything and let's help you with exactly what you want.
And Mo, thank you so much for that. So we're out of time. I mean, it goes so quickly. I'm sure we could have carried this on for another hour. But thank you so much again for all of our partner advisory board for joining and for your participation. Really, really appreciate your time as always. Thank you to everybody who's listened live and who will be listening later on. Hope you found it useful. Please continue to drop any comments in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.